three vehicles, providing for payment of amounts coming due thereunder, prescribing other matters relating thereto, and declaring an emergency.
So the ordinance has been read on its first reading. What would the board's desire be to have the ordinance read on its second reading tonight?
Second reading, Mayor, in abbreviated form, please.
So a motion and second to have the ordinance read on its second reading tonight. Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Hullabush,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance pursuant to the authority of Amendment 78 to the Arkansas Constitution and the laws of the state of Arkansas, authorizing the lease purchase of three vehicles, providing for the payment of amounts coming due thereunder, prescribing other matters relating thereto, and declaring an emergency.
So the ordinance has been read on its second reading tonight. What would be the board's desire to have the ordinance read on its third and final reading tonight?
Motion read, abbreviated form.
Second.
Motion and second to have the ordinance read on its third and final reading tonight. Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Hullabush,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance pursuant to the authority of Amendment 78 to the Arkansas Constitution and laws of the state of Arkansas, authorizing the lease purchase of three vehicles, providing for payment of amounts coming due thereunder, prescribing other matters relating thereto, and declaring an emergency.
So the ordinance has been read on its third and final reading. What would the board's desire be to adopt this ordinance tonight?
Motion to adopt.
So, motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Prior to the board voting to adopt, is there anyone here that wishes to speak for or against this particular ordinance? Hearing none, could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Hullabush,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes. The police department has also asked that emergency clause be attached to this ordinance. What would the board's desire be to attach an emergency clause?
I make a motion that we will attach it for emergency clause.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to attach emergency clause. Is there any other discussion? If not, could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Hullabush,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes. So the ordinance passes and the emergency clause is attached. Moving right along to item number 5, adopt an ordinance to rezone a tract of land located on Oak Hollow Lane from R1 rural residential to R2 single-family residential.
Good evening. Okay, we got a rezoning request by Leary Properties to rezone a tract of land from R1 rural residential to R2 single-family housing in order to develop a residential subdivision. Okay, if you aren't familiar with Oak Hollow is right here. This is Jefferson, New Middle School is right here. So you've got Mount Olive and Oak Hollow right here. It's a 16-acre tract of land. So the proposed development, they're planning on similar size lots as to everything that's surrounding there right now. We received no opposition to this. Planning Commission certified approval with a roll call vote of 6-0, I'm sorry, with one absent. Have any questions?
Does anybody have any questions for Tyler?
Would that subdivision be accessed from Jefferson, or would it be accessed from the backside where the existing?
There is no access from Jefferson. It's Mount Olive and Oak Hollow Lane.
Any other discussion? If not, what would the board's desire to be to have the ordinance read on its first reading tonight?
Motion to. Go ahead.
I make a motion that the ordinance be read on the first reading, abbreviated form.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to have it read in abbreviated form. Brewer?
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second to have the ordinance read in its abbreviated form on its first reading. Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Hullabush,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
An ordinance amending ordinance number K 286 is amended and for other purposes.
Ordinance has been read on its first reading. What would the board's desire be to have it read on its second reading tonight?
Second reading in abbreviated form.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second to have it read on its second reading tonight in abbreviated form. Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Holdridge.
Yes.
Brewer.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
An ordinance amending ordinance number K286 is amended and for other purposes.
Ordinance has been read on its second reading tonight. What would be the board's desire to have it read on its third and final reading?
Third and final reading in abbreviated form, please.
Second.
So a motion and a second to have it read on its third and final reading. Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Holdridge.
Yes.
Brewer.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
An ordinance amending ordinance number K286 is amended and for other purposes.
Is that three?
That's three.
So the ordinance has been read on its third and final reading tonight. What would be the board's desire to have this ordinance adopted?
Motion to
Motion.
adopt.
We have
Second.
a motion and a second to adopt. Prior to the board voting to adopt this ordinance, is there anyone that wishes to speak for or against this matter? Seeing and hearing none, could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Holdridge.
Yes.
Brewer.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes. So the ordinance is adopted. Moving right along to item number 6, to adopt an ordinance to rezone a tract of land at Parker Lane and Mandeville Road from M1 Limited Manufacturing to R1 Rural Residential.
Okay, another rezoning request by Jeremy Lindsay and John Nix. It's currently zoned M1 Limited Manufacturing. Want to take it to R1 Rural Residential. This property is on Parker Lane on this east side. You've got Highway 67 and 237, Rondo Road. Airport is right down here. Property owners just want to construct a single-family home and also possibly provide grazing land for livestock. We did receive one notice of opposition. The airport stated they weren't necessarily opposed to the rezoning, just to any construction within their runway safeties or runway protection zone. Can you put the other one up there, please? So they have possible plans in the future of extending their runway, and if that does happen, this area right here is their runway protection zone. According to FAA, you can't build any structures within that safety zone. So this little triangle right here is the area in which they wouldn't be able to build if this runway extension happens. The airport representatives did come to the Planning Commission meeting. They agreed to work out with the property owners where they could construct on that property so that there's no future issues. Planning Commission certified approval with a roll call vote of 4-2 with one absent. I believe airport representatives are here also if they want to add anything. You got any questions for me?
If we voted to rezone that tonight, is there any guarantee that they would not build, I mean, they're not going to build in that section?
We can guarantee that through Public Works, yes,
Okay.
when they pick up permits and whatnot.
And that would be on our agreement from the city with the property owner and the airport? Because typically it would be allowed, but we're saying.
Right.
that-
I wouldn't be able to do anything unless that runway was in place. Now, they would have to work that, I'm sorry, I may have misspoke, but they would have to work that out between the airport and the property owner. Me personally, we wouldn't legally be able to keep them from building in that area unless that runway was constructed. That would be a different
So,
story, but.
Paul, I mean, where do we stand?
Yeah, Paul.
So the timing of this property rezoning was just as we were also beginning those discussions about the need to extend the runway. We realized that should we do a 9,000-foot runway, which is what we were talking about, it would directly impact this individual. Now, we understand where our current runway protection zone is, they are not affected. We would first have to do a feasibility study to determine the exact length of the runway and determine where that runway protection zone would be. What we simply wanted to do was caution the property owner of where that potential impact would be. And it is their choice then whether or not to build within it at this point, because it is not an official runway protection zone. What we are trying to explain to them was, should the feasibility study come back and we do move forward with a 9,000-foot runway, any structures that are residential that would be located in it, the airport would be required to obtain and then to actually remove. So what we were just mostly letting them know is they have an opportunity to build outside of it and potentially then not be impacted. However, what we caution is we have not yet done that feasibility study, so we cannot say for sure that where that line will be at this point. It was just a recommendation
How long
to
will that
them.
take?
Feasibility study can take between 1.5 to 2 years.
So if we were to approve this tonight and they don't pay any attention to what we've discussed and they go construct this and it ends up being within that, the airport's gonna have to buy that piece of property?
Yes, so anything that is in that runway protection zone, the airport would have to obtain all the property that is affected. We don't take the entire parcel of land, only the pieces that are affected.
Where would that money come from that we would have to buy that piece of property from, airport's funds?
So, yeah, what we would do is we would, as part of the feasibility study, we work in the costs of acquiring the land, and we would do that through FAA grants with matches.
What was the attitude of Jeremy and the next guy that,
Well, certainly the way we broached the conversation initially, they weren't interested. I realize moving at this point, they have plans in place to build a home, and that would result in additional costs to them. So that's why we understand that the feasibility study takes a while, the actual construction, all that can take a while. They could potentially be in their home for a few years before we even were discussing purchasing property. But we just wanted to make them aware that this is our next plan, is to look into this.
would it be like a forcible eminent domain for the FAA to,
Yes,
they would have to leave?
that is correct.
Would that cost be like fair market value of what that property would be?
Yes.
Is
So,
the person that's planning on building that house here?
Yes.
yeah, they are.
Yes, come forward.
Thank you, Board. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City. As we all know, I mean, everything's been in the works for years and years. I purchased this property a little over a year ago, and there was nothing in place, and there's nothing to say that there will be anything in place. Everything's speculation in the future. I'm ready to build now. I'm ready to go on with my family's future. Why should I wait on them to make a decision 10 years down the road on if or when they will do this?
But you understand that if we approve this and they do that, you'll be forced out of that,
Yes, sir.
you'll be forced out of that piece of property at market value.
Yes, sir.
You don't have any problem with that?
No, sir, I do not.
Jeremy, are you planning on building within that area?
The-
Is the dwelling gonna reach into that, Tyler, or would it be part of your property?
I do not know where they're planning.
Jeremy, is your dwelling gonna be over in that, or is
The original plans do have the house within that triangle of the RPZ, of the runway protection zone. Yes.
You gonna leave it there, or are you thinking about moving it?
That all depends on works with us and the airport, if they're willing to discuss relocation of different areas. I mean, that's all depending on discussions of us.
Yeah, the airport's stance was, we're just giving information because we haven't done a feasibility study. We can't commit any kind of funds to move them without any kind of a study. So it becomes basically a risk that he has to choose whether or not he wants to.
Okay.
There's no alternate plan, Paul, on,
Right, we aren't opposing the construction, we're just making them aware of the potential impact of it.
Would it be possible to extend the runway the other
Yeah, that's what I
direction?
was fixing to say.
So the issue with that is, again, you have a runway protection zone off of that side. You have the freeway that is right there, and then you have an industrial area that includes rail that would fall into the runway protection zone off of that side. All of those structures are fairly non-movable, and what would end up happening is just like we have the runway 1331 that has a displaced threshold, we are unable to use part of that runway because of railway. So we would end up building but being unable to use that portion.
Any board members have any other questions? All right, what would be the board's desire to have the ordinance read on its first reading?
Motion to read in abbreviated form, please.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to have the ordinance read on its first reading tonight. Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Holovich,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance amending ordinance K 286 is amended and for other purposes.
So the ordinance has been read on its first reading tonight. What would be the board's desire to have it read on its second reading?
Mayor, I move that we suspend the rules and place the ordinance on the second reading.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to have the ordinance read on its second reading. Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Holovich,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance amending ordinance K 286 is amended and for other purposes.
The ordinance has been read on its second reading. What would be the desire of the board to have the ordinance read on its third and final reading tonight?
Third and final reading in abbreviated form, please.
Have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second to have it read on its third and final reading tonight. Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Holovich,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance amending ordinance K 286 is amended and for other purposes.
So the ordinance has been read on its third and final reading tonight. What would be the board's desire to adopt this ordinance?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt. Prior to the board voting to adopt, is there anyone here that wishes to speak for or against this ordinance? Seeing and hearing none, could you call the roll, please?
Minor,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
No.
Harris,
Yes.
Holovich,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown.
Yes. So the ordinance passes. Okay, moving right along, our next item on our regular agenda is number 7, to adopt an ordinance amending certain procedural provisions of the City of Chester, Arkansas Code of Ordinances pertaining to the Board of Directors' Rules of Order and Procedure. This item was added to the agenda at the request of Director Harris. Director Harris.
Yes, if you look at the item that, the first, well, I'll put it like this. This first was changed back in July of 2017. And basically what it did, it stated that a board member, when they put something on the agenda, they had to get, that if the department head objected, then it would be no longer placed on the agenda. And basically what this doing is going back to the July 17 procedure. That if you see the second item that's attached to here, it states that, and that's how it used to be back from July 17 back into 1975 or 1978 whatever. Okay, then the second item, what it's doing that when the city, every city manager, what he tried to put something, extend the timeline as to that about a week or something ago, it gives him the power back to extend the timeline if needed. That it's gonna be up to, just say if you missed that Wednesday deadline, that if the city manager and city clerk decide something that is beneficial to the city, it could be put on the agenda. And then the second item
Let
is.
me ask you one
Uh-huh.
question there for a moment. So is that, just to clarify, you're saying that is something that a board member would put in place, and if the city manager and the clerk deems that's necessary after the agenda closes, they can put it on? Not for the city manager or the city clerk to put something on the agenda?
Right, and
It
so,
would be from a board member's perspective.
well,
if
it's
past the
anybody,
deadline.
it's anybody, but if the deadline is passed, the city manager and the clerk could, if I'm understanding it right, he can correct me if I don't have it right, that we give him the opportunity to extend the deadline, which he tried before, and then it was based on the way this right here was written, he could not, and they changing it back. Okay, now the other item that it used to be on the agenda, question and comment from the mayor and board of directors, that was on here, but there was a policy saying that you can have it on the agenda. Come January the 1st, 2018, that was taken off the agenda. But there wasn't no policy stating to the fact that it could be placed on the agenda. That question and comment from the mayor and the board director at the city manager discretion as to where they're gonna be put at. Then the other item is that what's currently on the agenda, that was changed back in July the 7th, 2017, that no person could not put something, come before us and do a presentation unless you was a board on commissioner or you was an employee. This ain't getting a citizen to come and do a presentation, but it'll be limited to 10 minutes. There's a time limit in there. Then also in section 3, it's saying that we used to have our meeting televised and also put on, which we still now on YouTube. And there was nothing in place stating to the fact that the entire meeting had to be televised, but at Citizen Communication, it was cut off for the longest, you know. It didn't start back until basically when I started, what's that there now? I'm recording the whole board meeting, and I'm not editing nothing out, but if the city is start back televising the meeting, then Citizen Communication, I don't want you to get up and cut the voice of the people at the meeting. Cause you was paying, I think KSLI, I might not tell them $500 a month to show the meeting, but the entire meeting was not shown. You know, Citizen Communication was cut off. But right now, we just showing it through our websites and YouTube. Then the other item was, if a item was put on the agenda, that's section 4, and it didn't pass or something by a board member or someone else, that you don't have to wait until 180 days to put it back on the agenda. You would have 30 days before it can come back before the board, or you can do a 2/3 votes within that 30. See, either the person gonna have to wait till after 30 days, or they gonna have to get 2/3 votes of this board or this governing body to bring it back before this board. And that's basically what the changes being made and being put before this body to request to be changed.
Okay. Is there any comments or any discussions from the board? I have several issues, Director Harris. One is I do see some different, I think that there's some things in here that would need to be changed as far as how it's worded. It's a little bit confusing to me when I read it a few times. I go back to, in my personal opinion, strictly in my opinion, that the provisions that are put in place that we're operating under now are to put structure into our meetings, not only with the board of directors, but also with the city staff, and for that part, in my opinion, even with the citizens. I don't support this in its particular form because I think that this does take the control of the agenda pretty much out. It could be pretty much anything. We could have board members adding things to the agenda. We could have all these presentations again. We could have a number of things that might not be in the best interest of all of us, and we would have no time limits on these meetings. As far as the citizens' communication time, that's being aired now in the public. It was my understanding that that was stopped at that time due to KLFI charging the city more for going over our additional minutes when our meetings back at that time were lengthy. And that was the decision I was told when I approached him about airing that citizens' communication time several times, is that we were being billed additionally for that because they were dragging on and on and on and into the hours of the night. And so that was dropped at that time, and it was a decision that was made by the previous city manager. I don't have any problem in airing citizens' communication time on YouTube because all this stuff is free. I don't have any problem with that, but I hate to lose control and support something that we would have basically no control over these meetings at some point in time, when now I think our meetings are run very professionally. We're taking care of the city's business. You have an opportunity now under our current procedures to put things on the agenda within the agenda deadline. I just see some issues with passing this particular ordinance in the way that it's written, and I can't support it tonight in its current form. It would need some work, in my opinion, to clean it up to get within something that we would offer. You still have an opportunity to voice your opinion as a board member and as mayor during citizens' communication time. It's a structured event. Anytime that we have ordinance or something that are brought to this board that are on behalf of a director or anything, there is no time limit to discuss those types of actions. So I hate to see us do this now without maybe having some type of workshop or something to discuss how we can really get it down to where we keep the board meetings in tune to what, not only what we would want, as I would suspect as board members, but what our city staff would want that have to attend these board meetings, and for that matter, whatever the citizens want. I would like to see us work on that in some form or fashion to try to see if we can fix it.
I would like to respond to that, Mayor. We are up here, we are elected officials, and I think elected officials should have the desire to put something on the agenda. I don't think that, I don't see, everything gonna be, I don't see a whole lot of items just gonna be put on the agenda, but I think the elected official was elected, and I think they should have that ability to put something on the agenda without someone else over their head telling them what they cannot do. Then you got to get another board member to be able to put something on the agenda. And basically, if you look at the supporting documents, that's how it used to be up to July the 17th, July the 7th, 2017, that a board member could put something on the agenda, and then it would be voted up or voted down, just like it is.
That's not
now.
my understanding now, is you can bring something before,
No, you can't.
to have something placed on this agenda, whether it requires a second or not. The confusing aspect of it, when I first became mayor, is that we used to think that you would have to have a workshop that required a second to have something added to the agenda. We placed an item on the agenda, Director Roberts has brought, the fireworks ordinance. We placed a number of things on the agenda that directors have brought to the city council that we have discussed. Whether they've been passed or not, but we have discussed them, and I'm not for sure why you think that a director adding something on the agenda requires a second.
Well, that's how it's written up now. That
We haven't been complying with it.
if a department head object, now, we don't know if the department head have the check to what Director Robert put on the agenda. But if the department head object to it, then he would have to get another board member to get his approval to have the item to go forward.
That's coming from a department. I'm stating right now, I'm talking strictly on behalf of board members. Board members can put anything on the agenda that they want at any time.
That's not been the case, Mayor.
I've never been told that I couldn't add
That's
anything to
the
the
point
agenda.
I'm making. You ain't never been told, no.
I haven't added anything to the agenda,
And
and
you
one
might-
thing that I tried to add, they told me I had to get a second in a workshop, and I didn't get that, so, but, you know, but I think this, my personal opinion is we're going down the wrong track and trying to do that. This thing needs cleaning up a little bit. We're already airing citizens' communication time on that. I have no
Oh, and then
If you have something you want to add to the agenda, it should get added.
that's not been the case. And the other issue is that, that was added to, which I haven't done, is that if something's sent to the, on the place on the agenda, and the city attorney had to prove the legal requirement. And he also had stated, he had to prove the content. And I'll give an example of that, which I told him. Just say, for instance, you had to have a ladder or use aluminum. You could not use aluminum ladder within 10 feet of electric line. This is just an example. I don't know if there's nowhere in there. And then, that's the legal requirement. But if someone put on there, the ladder had to have 10 steps, but he said, for instance, it had to have 15 steps, but that's not the issue. The issue, the legal requirement is you cannot have a ladder, use a ladder that conduct electricity within 10 feet of electric line. So it's also added in there that the city attorney would have to prove legal requirement and not content.
It's my understanding that the city attorneys reviews the ordinance and make sure that it meets municipal code. It's
That's
not
legal
the subject
requirement.
matter of the ordinance.
That's
And
the
when we
point.
pass budget resolutions, all that, he's not looking at finances, he's not looking at anything, it's whether it's in the best interest of the city. He's looking at it from the standpoint of whether it is within municipal code and ordinances and it's available to be approved.
And
Has
that's
he looked at this ordinance?
Yes.
Have you reviewed this ordinance?
I don't know the distinction between content and legal requirement, but your description of what I do when reviewing these is correct, Mayor. And looking at this one, Director Harris asked me what he wanted to put in it. I put together a draft for him. He since modified it, and that's what you see in front of you. But as far as the actual content, the policy behind it, you're correct. I do not insert myself in that.
George, I have a question. It seems that though this protocol is already in place, and by going through with this ordinance, wouldn't it be just redundant because of what we already have in place towards the end for citizens to?
Well, this is just a change in the existing protocol. This is very similar to what existed, what'd you say, 14, 17? 4 years
17.
ago, I'm sorry.
July 17.
Yeah, 17.
They just going back that was already in place.
And at the time, there was a thought that the meetings needed to be a little bit tighter. There were some concepts that were on the agenda that obviously had no support outside of a single member. And so there was a mechanism that was put in place that, as the mayor pointed out, and Director Harris, it required a second absent support of the staff. And that's the discussion that's been going on here. And then tightening up on some time limits, and there were some occasions when so-and-so was speaking, but they didn't finish what they were going to say, so somebody else would stand up and yield time, and it would continue on, and they tried to put some limits on that, was the thinking at the time. Generally, without trying to speak for that board, but that's what I observed.
Thanks, George.
So to ask your redundancy, these kinds of rules are in place. They're in a different format, and they may not all be written down. Some now are within the discretion of the city manager, which this would take out of it. But that's the policy part of this.
All right.
Is there any other discussion?
I would like to just say that I personally am glad that our meetings are more businesslike and more, and we take care of business, but it's not overly long. We used to have hordes of people, children coming in here, making a presentation, which was wonderful, but that was not board business, It was recognition of children or groups or whatever. And we also have had board members who would read 20 solid minutes at least, things that he or she wanted on the board. And this has tightened it up considerably, and I'm well in favor of it, keeping this policy as it is.
May I?
Yes, sir.
We also had a department head come here and do a presentation for 35 minutes. So, but he's no longer here, so.
Any other discussion? Would you be open to having a workshop
to dig into this and kind of look at it and spend some time?
It's not,
Yes,
I
but he
don't.
did not attend. He did not
You
attend.
starting that again?
Let's go.
Oh,
Please,
I'm
move
just
on.
saying, we.
The ordinance is on the
Like,
table.
now,
It's-
she pointed out that I didn't attend a workshop, and that don't have nothing to do with what's going on now. If it did, I'm not getting
Let's
paid,
don't- let's don't
I'm not getting
conversation.
paid for being up here now.
Neither am
I'm
I.
on my free time, so whether I attend a workshop or not, that's my
It's your
own
business,
business.
it is, I
So,
understand that.
but it's not gonna say that I ain't missed a meeting, 2 meetings in the last 15 or 20 years. You ain't gonna say that.
Is there any other discussion as pertains to the ordinance Director Harris has presented? If not, what would be the board's desire to have the ordinance read on its first reading tonight? Is there a motion? Director Harris, would you like to make some motion to table this?
It don't matter one way or another, but, I know he asked for a workshop, but I don't know what the workshop gonna do. But
That's up to you, it's your ordinance.
I go ahead and try the workshop issue, see what it's gonna come with.
So you make a motion to table this until the workshop can be scheduled?
Well, now, I won't give a time limit, because I don't want you to schedule a workshop in September, so within the next,
I wouldn't be scheduling a workshop.
I'm
It's
just
your
saying.
workshop, you can schedule it wherever you want.
well, but then again, if nobody don't show up, what's the point of having a workshop? Huh?
I'll be there, Director Harris, I'll tell you that.
I'll be there as well.
So it doesn't matter, I'll take them and have a workshop in the next 7 days. Well, then again, you can also just, do that, and then you can, let me ask you this, we done had something on the agenda that you just read at one time, then you came back, then you redid it, then you just throwed it out, then you never, and I'm going referring to the ordinance about the no, it wasn't about that, what was that ordinance? There was some ordinance that it basically died, and it was replaced with another ordinance.
Can I
Yes, please.
really, this is ready to be read right now in its first time. The vote that you would take outside of tabling one would be to read it in an abbreviated fashion on its first reading, but there's no other action for the board to take on it if there's anything else. I
And he
mean,
can still schedule a workshop or anything.
right, in the interim. So you
Yes,
just.
you just read it one time, and you ain't got to read it and vote on it tonight.
What would be the board's desire to have the ordinance read on its first reading tonight in its abbreviated form?
Motion for first reading.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second to have the ordinance read on its first reading. That's an abbreviated form?
Yes,
Steve?
yes.
Is there any other discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Tyler,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Colabish,
Yes.
Brewer,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance amending certain procedural provisions of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Texarkana, Arkansas, and for other purposes.
The ordinance has been read on its first reading tonight. What would be the board's desire to have the ordinance read on its second reading tonight? No motion, then the ordinance will be moved to the next meeting. Okay, moving right along, our next item is citizen communication time. That takes care of all of our business tonight. Right now, we'll move into citizens communication time. At this time, the first person that slipped us this is David Peavy.
Flash drive. I'm David Peavy, 105 Olive, Texarkana, Arkansas. I was going to try to do a thing up on the screen. You have a copy of this. This is where citizens we're allowed to speak, but you're not allowed to respond. And so there are some situations where I believe that you should be allowed to respond. My first picture was an elephant standing on a ball. in a circus, and we used to have circuses up here, and that's why a lot of these things were changed so we wouldn't have a circus. Y'all were beating out some of the TV shows because of the things that were going on back then. But I also had, my next picture was a picture of a truck crashed into a telephone pole, and it said, "Too much Ram, not enough Dodge." And I had another picture of a lady underneath her car, and she says, "Let me finish this text before you pull me out, police officer." Which means sometime when we do a correction, we overcorrect and we have a crash. I believe that this would bring this back to a more reasonable, to where you can simply respond. So what I have wrote is really basically, I wanted to have it up there, but what I have in white is exactly what's in there now. What is in blue is what I have taken out. What is in yellow is what I have added. Action by the board is limited to those matters properly placed on the agenda or otherwise approved by the board for consideration at a meeting in accordance with the rules, code of ordinance of the city of Texarkana, Arkansas, and applicable laws. That next, this is not the only opportunity to address or discuss concerns with the board directors. I believe if you're not allowed to speak and have some communication, it would be your only chance. So, and I felt like that didn't belong in there. I thought it kind of jumped out anyway. In order to effectively manage meeting and ensure those wishing to speak in accordance with the rules have a reasonable opportunity to do so, and I left out the word debate, even though we don't want debates, but I added the word questions or comments from directors on issues raised by a member of the public during citizens' communication time. And I took out shall not and read may be answered and commented upon. Citizens' issues or concerns that would require board action shall not be taken or made unless a proper vote by the board is added to the agenda for consideration for discussion. What that's saying is, if I say we need to paint this building yellow, you would need some board action or probably something to do that with. So you would ask me, why in the world, and you would not answer those questions requiring board action, but just to answer a simple question, I felt like you should be able to do that and to build confidence with the citizens. And then, notwithstanding the foregoing, the directors may be addressing the presiding officer or city manager, refer items to the staff. So yes, you would say, Tyler, let's paint it yellow, or not. And then I said, directors should provide comments, ask questions, and give answers to the citizens so they have a full understanding of the citizens' issue so that proper decisions can be made in future agenda items. All I'm saying is you should have the right, whether you choose to or not, to be able to answer a question if you chose to. And I do not feel like this would cause, you still have the right to refuse, but it allows you to do that if you felt like it would be necessary for that citizen. Does that make, I know y'all can't answer that, so I'm going to say that y'all are in total agreement if y'all just be quiet and say thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else, Linda?
Linda Teeters, 229 Summit Drive. First, I want to clarify one thing. I had the honor of serving on this board for 4 years. And unless something happened after I was not on the board anymore, I have never been told in my life I was not allowed to speak. What we were told was they advised us not to engage, especially not to argue with citizens. But we have had people address the board in citizens' communication time before, and I've said things. So it may be that that's something new, and maybe certain people weren't here during other board meetings, but I was never told I wasn't allowed to speak. That may be a new policy, but if so, I'm not aware of that. So I did want to clarify that. Number two, as we all know, assistants are vital to smooth operations, whether it's a city or a business. And I'm very, very confused. We had an assistant city manager in place. We have highly qualified people that work for this city with many years of experience. They may not have expertise in city planning necessarily, but we have many people who work for our city who have city business and expertise in the fields at which they work. I cannot understand for the life of me. I thought if you named an assistant city manager, that person should have been in place as an interim city manager in case that person leaves. So I'm really confused as to why we had to go outside in the 11th hour and find an interim city manager when we had an assistant already in place. I don't understand. At Dr. Haskins' departure, why wasn't the assistant named? It reeks, in my opinion, of paybacks, prearranged secret deals, and questionable talks and meetings with various board members that probably should not have happened. This idea that we have talked and I was approached by them, in my humble opinion, speaks volumes. And I wanted to say that. We had an assistant city manager in place when Dr. Haskins departed. I thought that's why you had assistant city managers. And then number three, we also have policies in place about how both citizens that serve on boards or that serve in various committees and also city employees, we had a policy about how you should conduct yourself on social media. Please be careful when you're on social media and you call people out by name, especially when your claim is misleading or downright false. Simply deleting the said post when you've been called out with evidence is not sufficient, because the rumors and the false claims and personal attacks have already been stated and shared by people. So please be professional and watch what you post on social media if you don't have your facts straight. Doesn't matter where it fits your agenda or not. Let's stick to facts. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board tonight? Okay, at this time, we're going to go into executive session with Joey Martin and Heather for a few minutes to discuss our vacancy in our city manager's job. He's just going to make he's not going to discuss anything, he's just going to tell us what we're